The conference room was designed to impress. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city skyline, glass towers reflecting late-morning light like a promise of power. A long walnut table stretched across the room, surrounded by high-backed leather chairs already occupied by executives in tailored suits and crisp blouses. Tablets lay neatly in front of them. Coffee cups steamed quietly. At the head of the table sat Richard Hale, billionaire investor, founder, and the man everyone had learned to laugh with or stay silent around. He checked his watch, then glanced around the room with visible impatience. "Are we starting today?" he said dryly, "or waiting for the cleaning staff to finish sightseeing?" A few people chuckled. Not because the joke was good, but because it came from him. Near the wall, a woman in a grey janitor's uniform paused mid-step. She held a small cart with cleaning supplies, her gloved hand resting on the handle. Her name badge read Eleanor. "I'm sorry," she said calmly. "I'll be quick." Richard smirked. "Take your time," he said, waving a dismissive hand. "We're only discussing numbers you wouldn't understand anyway." This time the laughter was thinner, uneasy. Eleanor nodded once, neither defensive nor embarrassed. She finished wiping a small section of the whiteboard, parked her cart near the door, and stepped aside. Richard turned back to the room. "Now," he said, "let's get back to reality. The proposal from the junior analytics team is—" He made a face. Optimistic at best. He leaned back in his chair. "Frankly, it's amateur work. Projected growth curves that ignore market volatility, cost assumptions that belong in a college classroom." A man 2 seats down cleared his throat. "Sir, the model was reviewed twice." "Yes," Richard replied sharply, "and it was still wrong." Eleanor stood quietly near the wall, listening. Not staring, not intruding, just listening. Richard gestured toward the large screen mounted behind him. "Let's pull it up. I'd like to show everyone exactly where this fantasy falls apart." He clicked the remote. Nothing happened. He frowned and clicked again. "Is the projector on?" An assistant shifted in her seat. "It was working earlier." Richard sighed theatrically. Of course, technology never fails when it's actually useful. He looked around the room. "Can someone fix this?" Before anyone could respond, Eleanor spoke. "It's not broken," she said. The room stilled. Richard turned slowly. "Excuse me?" "The input source," Eleanor continued, her voice even. "It's set to HDMI 2. Your laptop is on 1. There was a pause. Richard raised an eyebrow. "And how would you know that?" Eleanor met his gaze, calm, unflinching. "Because it's the same projector model we installed on the 42nd floor last quarter. They all default to the second input after a firmware update." Someone at the table blinked. Richard gave a short laugh. "Right," he said. "And I suppose you moonlight in IT now?" Eleanor didn't answer that. She walked past the table instead, ignoring the sudden stiffness in the room. She reached the podium, leaned down, and pressed 2 buttons on the control panel. The screen flickered, then came to life. The first slide appeared. Richard opened his mouth to speak, then stopped. Because the slide on the screen wasn't the one he'd expected. It wasn't the junior team's proposal, it was a far more detailed model. Expanded projections, stress-tested variables, margins adjusted with surgical precision, and in the corner of the slide, small but unmistakable, was a name, Elena Morales. The room went silent, and for the first time since the meeting began, Richard Hale didn't say a word. The laughter hadn't fully faded when the lights in the conference room dimmed. At first, no one noticed who had touched the switch. The long glass table was surrounded by executives in tailored suits, tablets glowing faintly in front of them. At the head sat Richard Hale, the millionaire investor whose name was on the building itself. He leaned back in his chair, still smirking, one hand draped casually over the armrest. "Let's get back to the agenda," he said, "unless our cleaning staff has another suggestion." A few people chuckled again, lighter this time, more uncertain. At the side of the room, the janitor straightened. Her name was Evelyn Brooks. She had been quiet until now, standing near the wall with her cart, the same place she stood during every weekly executive meeting. Invisible, expected, safe. She stepped forward. "I do," she said. The room froze. Richard blinked, genuinely surprised. "Excuse me?" Evelyn walked calmly to the conference table. She wasn't flustered. She wasn't angry. Her movements were measured, deliberate, like someone who had already rehearsed this moment in her mind 100 times. "I have another suggestion," she repeated. "If you'll allow me." Richard laughed once, short and sharp. "This is a private meeting," he said. "You're welcome to finish your job after we're done." Evelyn reached the projector cable. "I already did," she said. Before anyone could stop her, she pressed the button. The projector hummed to life. The first slide filled the screen. Numbers, clean, precise, familiar to everyone in the room, and terrifying. The murmurs started immediately. "That's our Q3 forecast. Wait, that model was scrapped. Who gave her access to this?" Richard's smile vanished. Evelyn turned to face the room. "The model you rejected last quarter," she said calmly, "wasn't wrong. It was incomplete." She clicked to the next slide. A revised projection appeared. Same structure, different assumptions. The numbers shifted dramatically. Profit margins stabilized, risk exposure dropped, long-term losses disappeared. Silence replaced laughter. Richard leaned forward now, elbows on the table. "Where did you get this?" he asked. "I built it," Evelyn replied. Someone scoffed. "That's impossible." Evelyn didn't look at him. She looked at Richard. "I clean this room every week," she said. "I hear everything. I see what you throw away. And when you dismissed the analyst who raised concerns about the supply chain, I checked his math." She clicked again. "Emails, timelines, footnotes. I have 2 master's degrees," she continued. "One in economics, one in systems engineering. I stopped using them when my mother got sick and needed care. This job had flexible hours." No one interrupted her now. "You mocked me," she said, not accusing, stating a fact. "But you also approved a strategy that will cost this company millions within 18 months. The final slide appeared. Projected failure point. 17 months. Richard's face had gone pale. One of the board members whispered, "She's right." Another said, "Why wasn't this caught?" Evelyn turned off the projector. The lights came back on. She picked up her cart handle, but didn't move. "I didn't come here to embarrass anyone," she said. "I came because I didn't want to watch this place fail when it didn't have to." Richard stared at her for a long moment. Then he stood. The room tensed. "Sit down," he told the others. He looked directly at Evelyn. "You're not the janitor anymore," he said quietly. "You're staying." Evelyn met his gaze. "That depends," she replied, "on whether you're willing to listen this time." For the first time that morning, Richard Hale didn't laugh. He nodded. The laughter came from the far end of the conference table. Not loud, controlled, expensive laughter, the kind that didn't need to be shared to be understood. Evelyn Brooks stood near the wall, mop still in her hand, frozen mid-step. She hadn't meant to interrupt. The meeting room door had been left open, and she had followed her usual routine, moving quietly, invisibly. That was how she survived places like this, by not being noticed. But she had been noticed. "Well, this just keeps getting better," the man at the head of the table said, leaning back in his leather chair. His suit was charcoal grey, perfectly fitted. A watch worth more than Evelyn's yearly salary glinted on his wrist. "Do they let anyone wander into executive meetings now?" A few people chuckled. Others looked away. Evelyn felt heat rush to her face, but she kept her eyes down. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I'll be out of your way in just a moment." "Take your time," the man replied, smirking. "We wouldn't want to rush brilliance." Someone near him whispered something, and the laughter returned, sharper this time. The man stood. "For those of you who don't know," he said, gesturing casually toward Evelyn with his coffee cup, "this is what inefficiency looks like. People who don't understand the value of time." Evelyn's fingers tightened around the mop handle. She had cleaned this building for 6 years. She knew which offices stayed lit late, which desks were used, and which were just for show. She knew the rhythms of the place better than anyone in the room. What she hadn't planned on was today. "I apologize again," she said. "I was told to clean this room before 3. "It is 3, the man said, glancing at his watch. "And we're in the middle of discussing a multi-million-dollar acquisition. Something tells me you wouldn't understand." Evelyn lifted her head. "I understand numbers," she said. The room went still. The man blinked, surprised, then laughed again. "Oh, I'm sure you do." Evelyn took a slow breath. "I also understand that the revenue projections on slide 12 don't match the cash flow assumptions on slide 19. The laughter stopped. Several people turned toward the dark projector screen at the front of the room. The man's smile faded slightly. "Excuse me?" "You're overestimating growth by assuming immediate market penetration," Evelyn continued, her voice steady now. "But your own data shows a 6-month delay. That gap is where the losses are." Silence. A woman near the middle of the table frowned. "Slide 12, she murmured, already reaching for her tablet. The man's jaw tightened. "This is highly inappropriate." Evelyn stepped forward. "May I?" she asked, nodding toward the projector remote lying on the table. "No," the man snapped, but someone else spoke first. "Actually," the woman said slowly, eyes still on her screen. "She might be right." All eyes turned back to Evelyn. She picked up the remote and turned on the projector. The screen flickered to life, bathing the room in pale blue light. Charts appeared, graphs, numbers, the familiar language of power. Evelyn didn't hesitate. She walked to the front of the room like she had done it 100 times before, not confidently, precisely. She navigated the slides without looking down, flipping to the exact pages she had mentioned. "This is where the error starts," she said, pointing to a curve that rose too steeply. "You're using best-case adoption rates without adjusting for regulatory delay." One of the men leaned forward. That's our internal model." "I know," Evelyn said. "I helped build it." The words landed heavy. The man at the head of the table stood abruptly. "That's impossible." "I was a financial analyst," Evelyn said, "for 12 years, until my department was outsourced, until my mother got sick, until experience stopped mattering more than convenience." She clicked to the next slide. "If you move the launch back and reallocate marketing spend here," she said, circling a section, "you avoid the loss entirely." No one laughed now. The woman who had spoken earlier stared at the screen. "This fixes it," she said quietly. Another executive nodded. "It explains the discrepancy we couldn't account for." The millionaire's face had gone pale. "You've been listening to our meetings?" he demanded. Evelyn turned to him. "I clean this room every night," she said. "You leave everything behind. Your notes, your assumptions, your mistakes." The room felt smaller now, tighter. She set the remote down gently on the table. "I wasn't trying to embarrass anyone," she added. "You did that yourself." No one spoke. The man looked around, searching for support, for laughter, for something familiar. He found none. The woman in the blazer stood. "What's your name?" "Evelyn Brooks." She nodded. "Evelyn, would you be willing to stay after the meeting?" Evelyn glanced once at the mop still leaning against the wall. "Yes," she said. As the meeting resumed, quieter, humbler, the man who had laughed first sat down slowly, his authority no longer filling the room. And for the first time since she had entered the building, Evelyn Brooks was no longer invisible. The room was no longer laughing. Just an hour earlier, it had been filled with confidence and noise, executives talking over one another, polished shoes tapping impatiently against the floor, the low hum of power that came from people used to being listened to. Now, that same room felt smaller, heavier. The projector hummed softly. On the screen behind the conference table, a detailed presentation glowed. Charts, projections, architectural renderings, financial forecasts layered with precision. It wasn't a template. It wasn't something copied from a pitch deck online. It was original. The woman standing beside the projector remote, Eleanor Brooks, the janitor everyone had ignored, didn't rush. She let the silence work for her. At the head of the table, Richard Hale, the billionaire CEO, sat frozen. His earlier smirk was gone. His arms, once casually draped over the chair, were now stiff at his sides. "This is impossible," he said finally. Eleanor met his gaze, calm, unapologetic. "It's not," she replied. "You just never asked who was cleaning your offices at night." A murmur spread across the room. One of the board members leaned forward. "These projections, they solve the logistics problem we've been bleeding money on." Another added, "And this model, this is more efficient than anything our consultants proposed." Richard stood abruptly, chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You expect us to believe you did this?" Eleanor nodded once. "I expect you to believe your own data." She clicked the remote again. The final slide appeared. A paused patent application, filed months ago, under her name. The room erupted. Richard's face went pale. "You mocked me," Elena said, her voice steady but firm. "You joked about my job. You told the room I should stick to mops." She gestured around her. "But this building, this company, I've been studying it longer than any of you, just from a different angle." Silence again, thicker this time. The chairwoman of the board stood slowly. "Ms. Brooks," she said, "why are we seeing this now?" Eleanor exhaled. "Because today was the first day anyone let me finish a sentence." Richard opened his mouth, then closed it. For once, he had nothing. The meeting ended differently than it began. No applause, no jokes, just decisions. Elena walked out of the building that evening without her cleaning cart. Her badge no longer marked her as invisible. Emails followed. Calls. Offers. Behind her, Richard Hale remained in the boardroom, staring at the dark projector screen. He had lost something that day. Not money, authority, and Elena. She had never needed the projector to prove who she was. She only needed someone to finally turn it on.